Hey coders, Chris here with episode 9 of how to make a YouTube video app. In the previous lesson, we had created our custom class for the video detail view controller, and then we had added these elements onto the view. So title for the label, title for the description, a web view to show the YouTube content, and then we had hooked up these elements as IB outlets to our video detail view controller class. So in this lesson, we're going to pass the video that the user selects from our main view controller to our detail view controller, and then we're going to take the properties out of that video object and display them in these user elements. So how are we going to accomplish that? Well, first of all, let's go into our view controller. For our table view, when the user selects a cell, right now we're not really handling that scenario. So why don't we implement another of the table view's delegate methods to handle that event when someone selects a cell. So let's say table view did select row at index path. Now make sure you don't choose this other one which says did deselect, because that's not the one we're looking for. We're looking for did select row. Okay, so I'm going to choose that, and this method triggers whenever someone chooses a cell in the table view. And what we want to do is take note of which video the user selected. So we're going to create a property up here. We're going to call it var selected video, right, is type of video, and we're going to set it as an optional because it may, if the user doesn't select a video, then this is going to be nil, but if they do select a video, then we're going to store it in here. So we're going to say in here self.selectedVideo equals all of our videos, and then how do we know which one they selected? Well, there's this index path parameter here, so we can go indexPath.row, and so that keeps track of the video that the user selected in here. Okay, so now how are we going to pass this video object over to the video detail view controller? Well, in the video detail view controller, we're going to need another property to keep track of that video. So let's say var, we'll also call it selected video here. And just as in the view controller, it's going to be an optional type because it could be nil, it could be not set yet. Now we're going to go back to the view controller, and we're going to implement another method that gets triggered when a segue occurs. That means when we transition from the view controller to the detail one, this method gets called, and it's called prepare for segue. So if you start typing PRE, it should autocomplete, and you should be able to select this method here. Inside this method, we can get a reference to the destination view controller, and then set the selected video property of the destination view controller. So in our case, that's the video detail view controller. Okay, so let detail view controller equals, and we can get a reference to it through this parameter right here. This is the segue that got triggered. Dot destination view controller. You can see that it's a type of UI view controller, but we're actually going to cast it as a type of video detail view controller because we know that that's what it is. And so here we're going to say detail view controller dot selected video equals selected equals self dot selected video, and this is referring to this guy up here, which is hopefully set because the user has selected a cell. Okay, so this method happens before the transition finishes, and we are going to be setting the selected video property of the detail view controller. So now in the video detail view controller, we're going to want to take this selected video, and we're going to want to set our web view, title, and description for it. So I'm not going to do it in the view did load. Instead, I'm going to override another one called view did appear, and this method is called after the view has come onto the screen. And the reason for this is because when the view has appeared, we know the dimensions of the view. At this point, view did load, we don't know the size of the view yet, or at least from inside this method, we can't reliably access the size of the view. So when the view did appear, we can, and we need to know the size of the view because we're going to have to dynamically set the height of the web view, as you'll soon see. So in here, we're going to use a statement just to check if selected video is set. So we're going to use optional binding. If let's say video, or let's just call it vid, equals self.selected video. So inside here, that means that self.selected video exists. And we're going to say self.titleLabel.text equals vid.video title, self.descriptionLabel.text equals vid.video description. And finally, we need to set the web view. So let's construct a string first. So how we're going to display the YouTube video inside the web view is by using this HTML to embed the video. As you can see right here, it's using an iframe to do so. It's got a height of 180 and a width of 320, which we are going to make dynamic. But take a look at this source, or the URL of the iframe. It's youtube.com embed, and then this is going to be the video ID, and then we're going to use this, load it up into the web view, and it's going to display our video, which we can tap on play to play the video. So I'm going to copy this snippet of code. I'm going to construct a string. Let video embed string equals that. Okay, but I need to substitute the video ID in there. So the way I did it before in my old project was to use this wildcard and substitute the video ID in there. But here we can use just string concatenation. So I'm going to erase that, go like that. And then I'm just going to put the video ID in here. So vid.video ID. So it's going to take this chunk of string plus the video ID plus this chunk of string. And then lastly, we're going to call self.webview.loadHTML string, and we're going to pass in that video embed string, and the base URL is nil. Okay, so that's all set, but before we run it, I want to revisit how we are triggering that segue that transitions from the main view controller to the detail view controller. So if we click on this one, it is connected to the selection of a cell here, and then that triggers the segue to happen to transition to the detail view controller. But if we look at our code here, there is a potential problem, because in order for this to work, this did select row at index path must fire first so that we can set the selected video, and then the prepare for segue method must happen so that we can pass that selected video to the detail view controller's selected video property. If they're switched, if this guy happens first before this one, then what we're going to be passing is nil, because this one hasn't been set yet, right? So we need this method, did select row at index path, to happen first, and then this guy to happen second. So what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint in each method. I'm going to run it, and I'm going to see which one gets hit first. So you can set a breakpoint by clicking here on the gutter, and the breakpoint will just pause the execution at that point to let you check on variables, to let you, just take a look at your code. So I'm going to choose the first cell here. I'm going to tap it, and you can see here that it's come into prepare for segue. See, it's hit this breakpoint first. This green line is where it's paused currently. So this is bad because we want this to happen first. At this point, if I step through line by line, it's going to set nil into the detail view controller's selected video property, and as such, we're not going to see a video in the next view. Okay, let's continue execution. You can see second method it hits is this guy right here. At this point, there's no point in setting this selected video property because this has already happened. So as you can see, now that we go into the detail view controller, nothing is set. So what needs to happen here is in the main.storyboard, we can't hook up our segue to happen on selection of this cell because the order that those things happen in just doesn't work out. So I'm going to click on this segue. I'm going to hit delete. And what I'm going to do is create a manual segue from the view controller to the detail view controller so that we can programmatically call that segue to happen when we want it to. So I'm going to click this view controller, and you can see this little view controller icon here. I'm going to hold down Control, drag a line over to this video detail view controller, let go. I'm going to choose show, and then I'm going to select that segue, go over to the inspector pane, and in the storyboard segue, I'm going to give it a go to detail identifier because we're going to be calling this segue by its identifier here. Okay, so now when we go back to our view controller, at this point, that segue won't happen when we select a cell because it's a manual segue. We're going to have to trigger it programmatically. So what I'm going to do is add a line after we set the did select row at index path. After this gets set, I'm going to call the segue. So self.perform segue with identifier. The identifier we gave it was go to detail, and the sender, I'll just put self. And now let's run it and see which of those methods get hit. So I'm going to choose the first cell here. And as you can see, it's hit did select row at index path first. It's paused right here. And it has set the self.selected video property, and it's going to perform the segue, which is going to cause this method to happen. So there we go, it jumps to here now. And this is fine because now we've actually set self.selected video. So Detailviewcontroller is going to have that video. So continue program execution. And now you can see here on the detail view that our title and description is set. However, you'll notice that our video is not showing because here in the console it says app transport security has blocked a clear text resource load. So the problem here is because our Webview is trying to load a resource from youtube.com, and Xcode just has this security measure to not load anything unless you give it permission to, or you set some rules to allow resources to load from youtube.com. But what we're going to do is go into our info.plist, and we're just going to add an exception to allow arbitrary loads, which is to allow loading any sort of resources for the purpose of this demo. Ideally, you'd probably want to only add a rule for youtube.com. So I'm going to type capital A, lowercase p, and this should pop up. I'm going to press tab. Then we're going to open it up, click this plus so we can allow arbitrary loads. I'm going to say yes to that. And let's run it again. So now when I click the first cell, I'm just going to remove these breakpoints by dragging it off. Now you can see our video has loaded, but it's not really taking up the whole view because the height and width, as we can see in this string, is 180 and 320 there. So we're going to fix that, but let's just see if it plays. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That works. Now let's go back into our code, and we're going to go to the video detail controller. So we're going to calculate the height and the width that we need. In here, let width equals self.view.frame.size.width. Right, so that's the width of the entire view. So let's calculate the height off of that is equal to, since we know the ratio is 320 to 180, we're going to say width, which is this guy right here, divided by 320 times 180. So we're just going to get the difference in the real width versus the 320. So we get that ratio, and then we're going to multiply that by the original height to get the new height. So let's see what this is saying right here. Replace let, oh, it's just saying that we're not using the height variables, but we are. So in here, instead of 180, I'm going to do string concatenation again. So I'm just going to open up 2 quotes like that, plus height. Oh, but this is not a string, right? Unless I make it a string here. So let's just put that into a string like that. So that's going to be okay. And then for width, I'm also going to use string concatenation and add the width in there like that. Oh, but then I can't do math on the width, right? Because I need to do width divided by 320. So I can't change them to a string here, unfortunately. But I can change them into a string here. I'm going to create a new string object by passing in the number like that. So now I'm going to run it, and we should be able to see the video take up the whole view like that. So now it does take up the whole view, except the web view is not large enough to accommodate the height of the video thumbnail. So you can see there's this scrolling action here. So what I want to do, remember that when we added the web view in this storyboard, we added a constraint to just make it 180 with the intention of adjusting it a little later. So I'm going to open up the assistant editor, and up here I'm going to create an IB outlet for this height constraint. I'm just going to hold down Control, drag a line, put it here. I'm going to call it Webview height constraint like that. Go back to single view, go back to the video detail controller, and in here, because we have calculated the height of the video, we can adjust that height. Adjust the height of the web view constraint. So self.webview height constraint dot constant equals height. Okay, now let's run. So I'm going to click that, and then now we can see that the video is not cropped. And you might have noticed like a flash of label and label. We just need to change the default text for those two things. And pretty much we're done. So let's change the default text while we're at it. Go to main.storyboard. If we go here to our labels, we just have to erase the text there like that, so you don't see a flash of those two words, label, before that these details load. Okay, so that was the simple version of the YouTube video app where we hard-coded the videos into our project. And if you didn't see yesterday's vlog, we're going to be doing a shopping app next, but I'm still working out the details for that, so stay tuned. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 12 p.m. Talk to you guys later. Bye for now.